Good morning, guys. You guys can grab a seat. Before you do that, say hi to someone next to you real fast. Well, welcome to Humanity Church. We're so excited that you are here today and that you're joining us. This morning's going to be a little different in that, it's interesting when you read through the scriptures, Jesus did a lot more talking with people than he did talking at people. And one of the things we've talked about over the last few months through this pandemic at Humanity Church is how do we create more communal spaces where people don't just get talked at, but we get talked with and have conversations and engage in meaningful ways. Here's the thing, as someone who does a lot of speaking in my life, I know that most of you don't remember even what I spoke around last week. And I'm not offended by that, I just know that's human nature. But I know that you remember certain conversations that impacted your life. I know that you can look back 20 years ago and remember moments where you had an interaction with someone that transformed a part of who you are and a part of your life and how you see the world around you. And so we want to do more of that as we move forward. And so as we continue through the summer and our gatherings, we're going to be having what we're calling Renovate gatherings every now and then, where we're going to be taking some time to engage the scriptures in a meaningful way and then taking some time to interact, not just with one another, but with me and in different ways with these scriptures in a way that makes sense to us and transforms our lives. Today, we're going to be jumping into a conversation around forgiveness with this. So let's pause and let's pray. Jesus, we thank you that your presence is here and that you are with us, whether we are aware of it or not. For those who are keenly connected to that, I pray that you would move. For those who are searching for that or wondering about that or here inquisitive about that, God, I ask that you would meet them in this place today. And Jesus, I ask that you would, as we sang today, bring your light and that you would illuminate the places in our lives that need to be brought to light. God, that you would scale up anything that feels insurmountable in our lives and that you would prove yourself to be good in this community here today. And as we continue right now, with just your eyes closed, as we engage this conversation around forgiveness, I really don't want this to be a theoretical conversation about forgiveness. With your eyes closed, I want you just to think about all the relationships in your life that matter to you. Could be family, friends, coworkers, neighbors. And I want you just to think about the people that you currently are struggling to forgive. Could be something that's gone on a long time. It could be a parent that you just have years and years and years of baggage or conversations that have gone awry. Could be a close friend who betrayed you or continues to betray you or has hurt you. It could be an ex. It could be a coworker. It could be a boss. I just want you to think about it. Maybe there's lots of names coming to mind. But as we have this conversation today, I want you to think about them. I want that person to be on your mind, that this wouldn't be a theoretical conversation about a theological idea, but that it would be spiritual engagement with the relationships that you say matter most to you and that God has placed in your life. In Jesus' name, amen. There's this moment where Jesus is interacting with the guy that would eventually take over the whole movement of Jesus, Peter. And in Matthew chapter 18, starting in verse 21, he says this. He says, "Then Peter came to Jesus and asked, 'Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother when he sins against me? Up to 7 times?' Then Jesus answered, 'I tell you, not 7 times, but 77 times. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven is like a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. And he began the settlement, a man who owed him 10,000 talents, or some translations say 10,000 bags of gold. 10,000 talents was brought to him. Since he was not able to pay, the master ordered that he and his wife and his children and all that he had be sold to repay the debt. The servant fell on his knees before him. Patient with me. Be patient with me, he begged, and I will pay back everything. The servant's master took pity on him and canceled the debt and let him go. But when that servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii, or 100 pieces of silver in other translations. He grabbed him and began to choke him. Pay back what you owe me, he demanded. His fellow servant fell to his knees and begged him, be patient with me, I will pay you back. But he refused. Instead, he went off and had the man thrown into prison until he could pay the debt. When the other servants saw what had happened, they were greatly distressed and went and told their master everything that had happened. Then the master called the servant in. You wicked servant, he said, I canceled all that debt of yours because you begged me. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant just as I had on you? In anger, his master turned him over to the jailers to be tortured until he could pay back all that he owed. This is how my heavenly Father will treat each of you unless you forgive your brother from your heart. Harsh words right here. And it's interesting because whenever the scriptures talk about forgiveness, it's almost always talked about in a financial metaphor because they're so connected, I think. And it's the perfect metaphor to explain what forgiveness looks like. I want you just for a moment to imagine that when you're born, you're essentially given a giant sack of cash. Now, it's not a bank account, right? It's not. It would be nice, right? But this is not literal money. This sack of cash represents the person that God made you to be for the world. That this giant account has the fullness of your identity. It has your talents and abilities and your giftings and your callings and the assignments on your life, and it is full. In fact, what the scripture says that it's abundant. It is overflowing. It is life-giving. The scriptures actually say that you have everything you need. So when we're born into this world, we're given this account that is filled with everything that we need to live a life that is considered abundant here and now. And living with that level of abundance allows you to live free. You know those moments when your bank account's doing well? Those moments you're a little freer, aren't you? I mean, let's just be honest, right? You're not like, I don't know, should we go out to lunch? Should we not? Those are those moments where you're just allowed to live a little more free. Now imagine that when you're born, you are given a giant bank account filled with everything you need for your identity to live in that space, to share, to dream, to be vulnerable, to give yourself fully, to engage the life that you know you were made to live. This was the gift that God made you to be for the world. That when you interacted with one another, there was this sense of overwhelming abundance that was available in that space. It's one of the reasons why I love playing with my kids. Because if you've ever been around a 2-year-old or a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old, you know how free they are. Because their account's still full. Their identity is still full. That their sense of wonder and awe and vulnerability is still intact. But of course, what happens along the way with our sack of cash, our identity account, our sense of who we are, and the gift that we have to give to the world, suddenly people start taking from that account. And obviously, there's not a literal account that people take from, but they start taking from your identity fund through their actions. And so through betrayal and pain and wounds and upset and hurt, people start making withdrawals from that account that was designed to be abundant. Maybe your parents separated, and suddenly you were wondering, like, hey, where's the stability that I was designed to have in life? Maybe you found yourself bullied by your peers, and all of a sudden who you are is now up for grabs, and you're wondering, who am I, and what do I have to give, and will I actually be accepted by others in this world? Maybe someone close to you abandoned you or hurt you or took something from you that was precious that they never should have taken from you. People start to make withdrawals from the count. Now, some of them are really big. You can probably look back on your life and say, yeah, these were the big moments where people took big withdrawals from that account. But there's other small moments where people just start withdrawing through their actions, through their words, through the things that they say. And someone's taken from us. So we started out with this abundant account, but now we find ourselves living from the space of a deficit. Where what was once defined as abundant is now defined as not having what we once had. And what once felt like abundance and freedom now suddenly feels like scarcity, feels insecure. It feels like I don't actually have enough. And there are a couple of things that start to set in when we start experiencing this in life, especially early on. For some of us, we start to lash out violently at others. In fact, I would actually say every act of responding to this deficit is a violent act. It just looks different for each person. See, for some of us, it looks like anger and rage. For some of us, we're just angry about the cards that life has dealt us, the things that have happened, the things that we should have had or shouldn't have had, and there's this underlying rage that lives inside of us. For some of us, we turn to addiction of some sort or self-harm to try to make up for the deficit, the lack that we feel is there. For some of us, the violence looks like pulling back and isolating and not willing to fully engage with others around us. For some of us, it can look like anxiety and overwhelm and depression. And for some of us, it looks like insecurity and fear about so many things in life. So now we find ourselves operating not from abundance, but from a deficit. There's a negative in the account. And that impacts how we actually interact with the world around us. And in the process of that, in the process of using and losing our identity in that place, we start to harm others. As we lose our own relational capital and our own identity capital through everything that we've been through, we now start hemorrhaging out the little resources that we feel that we have left. Which is why I think this verse in Hebrews is always so powerful that talks about this. It says, "See to it that no one misses the grace of God and that no bitter root grows up to cause trouble and to defile many." See, bitterness is the hyperfixation on the debt that is owed you. That's what bitterness is. It's this hyperfixation that I am now operating from lack, I am operating from a deficit, I am operating from a negative, and it is focusing on that. And that hyperfixation on the debt that has owned you will destroy your life. Guarantee it. Because whoever took from you, I can guarantee you, was also in a deficit. And that's why they hurt you. That's why they decided to take from you. That's why they decided to say what they did. That's why they decided to abandon you. That's why they decided to make the decisions that they did. And they were spending their energy trying to rectify their debt. And you were just caught in the crosshairs. And so now you know what it's like. And this cycle continues from generation to generation to generation. And this is why bitterness is so poisonous, because it turns you into the person who hurt you. You become exactly like the person who made the withdraw from your account. It's just a spiritual principle. It is constant. It is why the abused often become abusers. And it's why those who had parents in addiction oftentimes take on another type of addiction. It might pass from alcoholism to perfectionism, but it's all the same addiction. And so we find ourselves becoming exactly like the people who made all the withdrawals in our account, wondering, how do we get out of this cycle? I remember 2 weeks ago, I started going back to the gym, and you really don't have, I know I've said this twice, you don't have to clap every time. I know it's like a thing, but I know I'm fat. It's okay, right? So I get to the gym, and I didn't have a lock for my locker. And in the gym where I go to, they sell locks in the locker room. Brilliant idea, right? So I put my credit card in to get the lock and press the button for the lock, do all the things. And then where the lock's supposed to drop out, the lock doesn't drop out. And I'm like, I just paid $10 for this lock. I should have a lock. So I go to the front desk. They say, you have to call the vending company. So I call the vending company, and I say, hey, I was at this gym this week, and I bought a lock from your vending machine. It wasn't there, blah, blah, blah. Without taking any information, they say, oh, it'll be back in your account this week. I'm like, how do you know my account number? Oh, hold on, we'll take it down for you, right? So I give them my account number, I give all the information, and they say, it'll be back in your account this week. A week goes by. There's no $10 back in the account. Now, let me just tell you, we're financially okay. We're not strapped for $10, but I'm frustrated that the $10 is not back in my account, right? And so I call them back up, and I'm like, hey, I lost the lock. I didn't get a lock at the gym. I put the $10 in. I need the refund. Same thing. Oh, it'll be back in your account this week. Would you like to know my name and my account number? Oh, yeah, let's take that down, right? And I said, can you tell me like a date when this will be back into my account? And they said 3 days. I said, great. I will make sure that on Wednesday, this money is in my account. Wednesday rolls around. Still no money in my account, right? Now, here's the deal. Like I said, we are not in need of $10, right? We're not like so strapped that we're like, where's the $10? But I'm telling you, I am so frustrated about the $10 because of the principle of the thing, right? It's not even about the $10 or the lock anymore. It is like, I have been wronged. I have been robbed of my $10. I have been abused by this vending company, and I need the $10 back. And let me just tell you, every now and then, I'll be sitting there scrolling through Instagram, and what floods my mind? Nathan, you need to get that $10 back. I'll be hanging out with the kids, playing Legos, and all of a sudden it's like, that $10 is not in my account, right? And I don't need the $10, but for some reason, I am hyper-fixated on the $10. And I thought to myself, this is exactly what happens when we find ourselves at a deficit. No matter how big or how small, what happens is that it creeps back in and then it zaps energy. You're just going about your business and all of a sudden, poop, there it pops in. You're going about like, oh, I remember when that person said this. You're going about your business. Oh, remember when this happened when you were a kid? Oh, you go through life. You're like, oh, man, I screwed up in this way, or they did this, or why did this happen? And it just starts sucking energy from you. And the time and energy that I could have been spending with my kids or could have been spending on Instagram is now being used to think about the stupid $10 for a lock at the gym. Because now I'm at a deficit still in this place. See, forgiveness is the process. It's the choice of deciding that you are no longer going to live your life at a deficit. That's the choice. It is a choice saying, I no longer choose to live my life from the perspective that I am at a deficit. And it is also a choice saying, I am not going to spend my energy making up for what someone else did in my life. I'm going to stop using the energy that was given me to give away to the world around me to make up for the small debt that is now perceived in my life. That their decision to rob from you is no longer going to steal your future from you. So that you can actually go on living here and now. It's a decision to literally forego your need to attempt to keep collecting on the debt that they owe you in some way, shape, or form. So you no longer need to use your energy being a debt collector. No one likes debt collectors, right? Let alone being one, I can tell you. And so this is the power of this, is that it says just a little bit of bitterness grows up and it defiles so much in life. And here's the crazy thing, is just like that stupid $10 lock impacted my time with my kids at moments, my time at work, like, oh, I gotta check in on that $10. That you carry that deficit into every single other relationship that you have. See, the lie is that it just stays between me and the person that hurt me, or the person that abused me, or the person that left me, or the person that wronged for me. But it actually travels into every single arena of your life, whether you like it or not. See, and you might think, well, that's great. I choose to no longer collect on it. But what about the deficit that's still there? What about all the things that were taken from me? Well, what about all the identity that was taken from me, the years that were taken from me, the things that I was owed that I wasn't given in life? I'm still at a deficit. That there's a passage in Joel that I love that talks about how God restores things that were taken from us in such a poetic way. And he says this to the Israelites in this moment where things had been taken from them. He says, I will repay you for the years that the locusts have eaten. The great locusts and the young locusts and other locusts and the locust swarms. He's like, all the big things that have happened and little things and the young things and the old things. I will repay everything that was taken from you, big, small, old, young. And he says, my great army that I sent among you, you will have plenty to eat until you are full, and you will praise the name of the Lord your God who has worked wonders for you. Never again will my people be ashamed. Then you will know that I am in Israel, that I am the Lord your God, and there is no other. Never again will my people be ashamed. Now, obviously, he's talking about locusts here and orchards and vineyards being restored, but there's a spiritual principle here that connects to other areas of our lives. See, when you are willing to release control over to God, of needing to collect on the debt, of needing to make up for everything that was taken for you, he is actually interested in healing you over and over and over again and replenishing your account over and over and over again. He is actually not just interested in saying, hey, I'm going to heal the wound, but I will return everything that was taken for you if you're willing to stop playing this role. See, when you're trying to make up the deficit by playing God, there's no room for God to actually be God and to give you back what you need. You're over here like, I'm trying to collect on this debt. I'm going to make them pay. I'm going to get them back. I'm not going to withhold. I'm not going to forgive them. I'm going to withhold that. I'm going to be bitter. And you're over here trying to collect it. The whole time God's like, hey, if you would just release that need to collect on that, I will give you back everything that was taken from you. If you are just willing to forgive, to forego your need to collect on this debt. And here's the beautiful thing, is that as you choose to forgive and go again, to continue to give yourself, to step out from behind all the insecurity, and to step out from behind all the anger, and to step out from behind all the rage and the fear and the addiction, and come out into the light and go again, guess what? You're going to be hurt again. But God promises to restore again and again and again and again, because he says, in my people there will be no shame for what's taken place in your life. See, John says this to us. He says, the thief comes only to steal and to kill and to destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. See, a lot of times Christians take this passage and make it about like, God's going to give you a big bank account. He's going to give you a car. He's going to give you a career. He's going to give you, right? It is actually not about that. This is about God himself saying, I'm going to return all the debt that's owed to you so that you can once again get back to the abundant life of knowing who you are and whose you are, of knowing the fullness that is in you, of being willing to give yourself fully because you are now no longer operating from a deficit. You are operating once again from abundance. And that's the beautiful thing about this, so that you can live and be free again. And where do we actually get the spiritual strength to do this? That's the big question, right? Because if this was easy, everyone would be doing it. This would be like we can make billions off of this. Maybe that's what we need to do, right? Just write something or sell something. But if you look at the metaphor that Jesus used, that actually gives us a clue as to what fuels this engagement with one another. See, if you look at the metaphor that Jesus used, the one important thing is to recognize that God himself has made a way for us to both be forgiven and to forgive freely. See, because in this metaphor that we started out with, God is the one who was owed 10,000 bags of gold by us. That we're the servant, that God's like, hey, you owed me 10,000 bags of gold. And when we come to him and say, would you please forgive the debt? He says, absolutely. That's the role that he plays in that. See, the God who is owed 10,000 bags of gold from us, we are the one holding the debt. We are the one responsible to pay that back. Spiritually, we are at a deficit with God due to our brokenness, and God has zero interest in holding that debt over your head. He has zero interest in making you pay for that debt. In fact, he went above and beyond what was necessary to make sure that you did not have to pay for that debt. It's so interesting because there's so much talk these days about how we get rid of shame and how do we get rid of this concept of being self-loathing when it comes to faith conversations. And there's so many people that are wanting to get rid of shame by not talking about our brokenness. Like if we just don't talk about the debt that we owe, then somehow we won't be ashamed. And if we talk about the debt that we owe to God, it is only a shaming conversation. There's no other possibility for that in there. See, I'm going to ask you to consider that your shame over your brokenness really has nothing to do with the brokenness itself. It's how you're relating to it, not how God's relating to it. Because essentially what that's saying, when we're saying, hey, the way to get rid of shame is just to not talk about sin, to not talk about brokenness, to not talk about our darkness, is like saying, I'm experiencing sickness, so let's not talk about the virus, right? Like I'm sick, and the doctor's over here going, hey, I got some antibiotics, we're good, just take this, you'll be good. No, I'm ashamed, right? Let's not talk about the sickness. If we talk about the sickness, it makes me feel even worse, right? And the doctor's over here going, here's the cure. If you're, no. If you talk about the sickness, it makes me feel sick. But that's what we do with this. As if talking about it is what creates the sickness. No, talking about it is not what creates the sickness. It's our unwillingness to bring it into the light that creates the sickness in the middle of this. See, God is not ever in a shame conversation. He's not interested in having a shame conversation with you. He is in a forgiveness conversation. The entire arch of the scriptures is, I have forgiven you. Would you please choose to accept that forgiveness and stop hanging in the shame of life? Would you please choose to engage this so that you can move on? This is the type of relationship he invites into, and it's a perfect, beautiful context for us then to forgive others from. Because when I am aware of the debt that has been forgiven me, it is incredibly easy then to look at how others have wronged me and say, I choose to forgive the small debt that you owe me because I have been forgiven much. There is so much that's been released from me. See, when Peter asks, should I forgive 7 times? I imagine him asking that very smugly, knowing Peter from the scriptures, right? Like, Jesus, I'm going to forgive 7 times, right? And I imagine he was like, look at how amazing I am in this conversation. And Jesus is like, that's good for this hour, right? But keep going. Actually, what you need to do is like 77 times. He's saying, like, let's blow this out the water from what you're thinking. Your thinking is way too small. And you thought you were the good one over here. Let me just tell you, this is how big my forgiveness runs and how I would like your forgiveness to run. Because when we recognize the debt that has been paid for us, it's easy to forgive the debt of others. We took the kids on Thursday to Disneyland for Colin's birthday, which was super fun. And the next day, for those of you taking your kids to Disneyland, it's an expense, it's a day. We were there from 7:30 a.m. until 10:30 p.m. It was a day, right? Food, toys, all the gamut, right? The next morning, we get up, and we had gotten Jackson some small toy, and his brother was playing with it, and he got upset that his brother was playing with his toy, and I said, let your brother play with the toy for a minute. And Jackson busts into his angry face and starts crying, and he says, you never give me anything.
Yeah, baby. There you go, yeah.
I was like, hold your hand, right? Like, and he goes into this tirade around, you never give me anything, you never do anything nice for me. And he just goes down I just let him do his thing and then send him to his room, right? And as I'm watching him have this interaction with me, right, I thought to myself, this is how we interact with God when we are unwilling to forgive others. When we're looking at life going, life's so unfair and I don't have enough and people took things from me and you don't know the cards that I was dealt and you don't know what was taken from me. And we're going to God saying, you never give me anything. And he looks at us going, hold my hand, right? In fact, there's passages in the scriptures where he says, it is lucky that I do not change because I just choose to forgive again over there. Because this is so often how we interact with him. And that's how we sound to God when we are unwilling to forgive others the debt that was owed to us. See, but until you recognize the debt that Jesus paid for you on the cross, it'll be very difficult to then forgive others in the middle of this thing. And the tragic thing is that for some of you, you have chosen to give people from your past so much power that you are dictating how you experience God himself today. That you've literally handed the keys of your life over to the people who have hurt you in the past because you at times make statements like, I'm never going to be like them. That whole time, they're deciding how you are going to live. And so, forgiveness says, I no longer want to allow you to dictate how I live. And I no longer want to give you power over how I engage my life here and now. And there are 3 lies that I think the enemy tells us over and over again in this conversation around forgiveness that I find so common in my coaching and my interaction with so many different people over the years. And I think these 3 lies are so prevalent, not only in our culture, but in the human spirit, and they just show up constant. See, the first one that I think that shows up so often in my conversations with people is that forgiveness is a feeling. That I need to get to this place where I'm ready to forgive, or I need to feel like it's time to forgive. Let me just tell you, if you are waiting to feel ready to forgive someone, you will be waiting forever. If you are waiting to have this moment where the stars align and the moonbeams pour out over your heart, and you're having like this ayahuasca moment, and you're like, now my chakras are open and I can forgive, it's not going to happen. Because forgiveness is actually not a feeling, and you are not a victim to your emotions in life. They do not hold you back from stepping into it. You may never actually feel like forgiving the people that have wronged you, but the good thing is that forgiveness is a choice from moment to moment. And here's the thing, forgiveness is not a one and done process. You forgive, and then guess what? The next moment, you may grab onto that bitterness again, and you get to forgive again. It is a constant discipline in your life if you are committed to being free. If you would like to be enslaved, feel free to not engage this discipline. But if you're interested in freedom, you will engage this discipline on a regular basis. You will make this choice on a regular basis. The other lie that I think we get caught up in is that by withholding forgiveness, somehow it allows me to remain in power. It allows me to remain in control. It allows me to hold on to the future of that. See, here's the crazy thing that I found, is that whoever you're struggling to forgive, whoever still holds energy in your life, they're probably off living free. They may not even know what happened. They might not even be aware of how they hurt you, the depth of which they hurt you, and you're over here going, I'm holding on to this forgiveness because I'm going to show them. Meanwhile, you're in prison and they're off living their life. This is the dangerous thing about bitterness, is that it confuses us into thinking we are in power when they're actually the ones living free, and we're the ones stuck in the cage of our own bitterness. See, there's a power that comes with release, not holding on to this. See, oftentimes we find ourselves saying, I'm the one who holds the power, when flipped on its head is I am actually the one who is enslaved in the middle of all of this. And the last lie that I think people buy into, that I've noticed in my conversations over the years with forgiveness, is that forgiveness somehow means letting them off the hook. That forgiveness somehow means, hey, what they did is okay, and what they did is acceptable, and I am going to give them a pass for what they did. See, Forgiveness is actually not excusing anyone's behavior. It's not saying, hey, what they did is good, it doesn't matter, I'm gonna put my rose-colored glasses on, I'm gonna stick my head in the sand and pretend that didn't happen. It's actually just saying, look, I no longer choose to have you have power over my future. I'm no longer choosing to give you that type of power. I'm no longer choosing to allow you to dictate where I'm headed in my life. Now, part of that may look like, hey, I still have some boundaries, and I still have some things, some expectations in this. But here's the beautiful thing, is that when you forgive, it actually gives you the ability to make active choices about how you are going to participate in that relationship. It moves you out of a reactionary state and into a decision state. It moves you from, hey, I'm just responding to what you have done, to I am choosing how I interact with you in this moment. Bitterness is a really poor form of punishment to other people, because you're the one that actually ends up dying in the process. And oftentimes, by releasing other people, it also releases God to deal with them. Because just like when you're holding on to the need to collect the debt, there's not a lot of room for God to fill you up. There's not a lot of room for God to say, hey, I will restore everything that was taken for you. On the flip side, when you're trying to make them pay, there's not a lot of room for God to come in and bring his correction in their life. There's not a lot of room for God to engage with them because you're the one attempting to play God in the middle of all of that. And so these are some of the lies that I've noticed take place in this forgiveness conversation that keep us from stepping into the future and the freedom that God has for us. That keep us from saying, God, please come and refill the account. Bring me back everything that was taken so that I can live free and I can break the cycle, not just in that relationship, but every single other relationship in my life. So we're going to do something unique right now. To our online campus, we're going to dismiss you right now. And so online campus, in your comment sections right now, there's going to be a Zoom link where you guys can log on. You're going to be having a conversation with some of our online pastors around continuing this engagement around forgiveness. So if you're on YouTube, Facebook, or if you're on our website, just look for that Zoom comment in the link, and we are going to see you guys later. And those of us here, we're going to engage in some of this conversation on a more personal level.